Okay, so we've got some new consoles on the horizon, and lately we've been getting a lot of info about them. We have the Project Scorpio, which is the updated Xbox One, the PS4K, also known as the PS4 Neo, and the enigmatic Nintendo NX, which seems to have different tech specs and different controllers every other time we get news about it. And I guess today we're going to kind of, do a brief overview of what these consoles may or may not be, and how they might shake up the market, and how we think things are going to play out with them. So, first off, I'm just going to give my opinion on this. The PS4K, I'm not very impressed by it. Now, you actually own a PS4, so I gotta ask you, will you actually be buying a PS4K when it comes out, or are you going to stick with the base PS4?
Oh, definitely not when it comes out. Not right away, anyways. I mean, actually, let me caveat that. Depending on whether or not they have, like, a trade-in deal and get, like, $300 off or something like that, like, that's the only way I can see myself going when it first comes out. But the way they've been hyping it up is basically it's a PS4 for 4K televisions, and at least for the first 2 years on paper, they say the gameplay difference is going to be minimal if non-existent, so I see no real reason to hurry up and pre-order this thing.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was actually going over... Okay, I'm a PC guy. I like the tech specs. And I was looking at the rumored, which, from what I understand the sources on this, I think Digital Foundry was one of the websites that first broke this. So they're fairly reliable, but it's not set in stone. But the tech specs so far, it's just like a mildly overclocked PS4. And I think they're also bumping up the number of compute units on the GPU, and that's not going to make a huge difference. It's also going to have slightly more memory bandwidth, but again, not a huge difference. You might see games running closer to that 1080p 60 FPS target, and yes, it'll be capable of 4K video playback, no problem. I mean, 4K video playback's not that hard to do, but 4K gameplay, which is what I've seen a few Sony fanboys, saying, that's not going to happen on this machine. I'm sorry, it's just way out of its league.
But I mean, Sony also released a newsletter, and I don't have it up in front of me. I apologize, but I'm going to remember most of it and ad-lib some of this. They actually released saying that people developers making games, they are not allowed to make they're not allowed to make two different versions for the next 2 years. So if you're going to claim 60 frames, it's going to be 60 frames on both systems, or you're not coming on the PS4, which is bold, super bold. It's also really confusing why there's a boost in hardware, but like you were saying, it's a barely there boost, and I really think that Sony's sitting on a warehouse full of 4K TVs and are like, what's the best way to move these things? Well, let's start selling our number one system with the capability of, being played on these televisions. It really does feel like an intercompany idea to just move more product than anything else.
That's actually a strong possibility. What if we see PS4Ks bundled with 4K televisions?
Oh, if there's still Best Buys and Sears left in 2 years a year from now when they do this, I'm guaranteeing you will see that. That's almost par of the course at this point, I believe.
And what you mentioned before about both versions of the game, both on the PS4 and the PS4K, they will both have to run at 60 FPS.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think that's very doable, but the one on the PS4K is going to look a little better, but probably not that much.
Right, and again, not being for console folk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have played on PC, I have played on consoles, I know the pros and cons of both, and I'm one of those terrible freaking hippie people that's somewhere in the middle and never wants to pick a side. But, console folk in general are not going to scrutinize the difference. Not if it all goes out as planned, but that's a big if at this point, because how are developers going to have a better set of hardware and not develop things that run better on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have my doubts that they will actually kind of stick to that promise, that they're not going to leave the original PS4 behind. I think that we're going to start seeing stuff come out for the PS4K that will not be on the normal baseline PS4. The same thing happened with Nintendo and their handhelds back in the DS days.
Yeah.
The DSi was a slightly overclocked Nintendo DS, and it started getting exclusive titles that the original DS just couldn't run.
The same thing just happened to the 3DS earlier this year, where they made the new 3DS and came out with a bunch of games that they say they run on the old 3DS but run terribly. And
Monster
I guess
Hunter.
Monster Hunter, Hyrule Warriors being probably the biggest example of them.
Yes.
And this really opens the question: is Sony going to be as blatantly dumb as Nintendo and try to hide this? And the impression I'm getting right now is that Sony doesn't want that to happen for at least 1 to 2 years. And that's the impression I'm getting. Whether or not they make it that long, who knows? But the reason for is PlayStation 4 has just sold more units in a shorter amount of time than Sony has ever sold any unit in that spare amount of time. PS4 is riding really, really high in an age where 4 years ago, everyone was wondering if people even still wanted to buy consoles. To alienate them, to alienate that much of the market, and to think that that much of the market will just carry over and to buy the new system after a 4-year half-life is, I'm not saying they're not capable of being that, just dumb. I can't think of a better word for it. But I'd hope that they aren't, That's an awful lot of people you'll alienate if you start making games for that new system, and you can't run them well, if not good, on the older system.
Now, hubris has not taken down, but it has brought low some other console makers, like the one we're going to talk about next, Microsoft. Hey, nice segue, huh?
Yeah.
The Project Scorpio, now this thing is a behemoth. They're claiming 6 teraflops of graphical performance, and I know they're throwing around the term teraflops. That's been a buzzword lately.
Yep.
With consoles and PC hardware as well. I will say this right now: teraflops ain't everything. Okay, at the end of the day, it comes down to how the games actually run, not how many teraflops you have on your little tech spec sheet.
Mm-hmm.
But if it really is a 6 teraflop machine, that's an insane amount of power in a console. That's actually almost as powerful as my PC. But what has me worried is that Project Scorpio is still using an 8-core AMD CPU, and I don't think it's going to be using the new AMD Zen cores. It's going to be using the older AMD cores, which means that 6 teraflops GPU is going to be choked by a really weak, anemic CPU. And I have a feeling that, yes, these games are going to be able to run at really high resolutions, but the frame rate's going to be awful. Right now, Microsoft is claiming it's 4K gaming. It's here on consoles. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, yeah, 4K gaming's there, but at what frame rate? Are we going to go back to the PS2 days where we had some really big open world games and stuff on console, but they ran at 20 to 30 FPS? I don't want to go back to that. I really don't.
My honest opinion about both the Neo and the Scorpio, which, by the way, kudos to Microsoft, a much cooler name. I don't think that any of these mid systems, because these are basically the PlayStation 4S and the Xbox One S versions of these things, are really made to make the games any brighter or any more high fidelity. I really think that all that stuff is they're banking a lot on 2 things: 4K televisions and VR. And I think tons of this hardware is going to be specifically just so that PS4 can run without a separate box for its PlayStation VR. And I believe Microsoft wants the Oculus on the Xbox One.
I know they claim that these machines are VR capable, and I have no doubt if the specifications are correct that the Scorpio is definitely 4K capable. But I have my doubts about the PS4K. Scorpio definitely PS4K. It looks a little weak to be 4K capable. It might be, but they're cutting it very close.
The PlayStation Neo though is scheduled to come out, I think, for this holiday season though. Like it'll probably be out in November, maybe December, the latest. And Scorpio still big question marks at this point, so that could just be time waiting and time, biding time. Sony could just be like, well, we're going to release this, and then this is going to be like our version of whatever the Microsoft Mini Xbox One they just launched is, and then 2 years from there, kick it off with something bigger and better, which, oh, God, that just sounds depressing thinking about it.
And I find it very strange that they were aiming for another, 8+ year console cycle with these machines. And they're already doing hardware refreshes. And I think part of the problem is this is the weakest that consoles have been in comparison to PCs in a very long time. Like when the Xbox 360 and the PS3 came out, the consoles actually leapfrogged PCs for a few months. They were ahead of PCs in performance for a few months, the PCs, whenever they came out. And they had to come out with something new because you can't ignore the PC market, and I don't think developers like being held back by anemic consoles, and that also holds back the PC ports somewhat. I don't know. I think the relative power of the consoles to the PCs had something to do with these hardware refreshes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Continue.
I was just going to finish by saying, but 4K televisions and trying to make 4K mainstream, that's probably got something to do with it as well. Probably more to do with it than anything, honestly.
I'm positive that all the checkpoints you just went down have something to do with it. I don't particularly know if consoles are that scared of the PC market at this point. And I say that, again, not to incite rage in the PC community or market or anything like that, but the world thought, or at least a good chunk of gamers thought 2 years ago, that these consoles would not sell. And in fact, they sold a lot better than, well, at least for the PlayStation anyway, sold a lot better than what they were expecting them to do, showing that, there is still definitely a demand for a system that is just a simple plug and play. That was probably more apt too. The simplicity, and not to mention the price point, are still gigantic factors in the consoles. And I know we're leaving this for another segment a little later, but that's also going to be another big thing is Sony and Microsoft going to shoot themselves in the foot if they want to do a 2-year cycle of having fresher, better hardware? And is there any real way around that if they're going to be competing with PCs? Because PCs have new hardware monthly that's capable for people to buy.
Not monthly. It's more like a 6-month to a year cycle for CPUs and GPUs.
It's pretty quick. The turnaround is enormous compared to an 8 to 10 year cycle.
Yeah, and that's another thing. The console cycle has been getting longer as time has gone on. Unless we count this refresh as a new cycle, which people kind of debate whether or not it is. I don't think it is. I think this is still the 8th console gen. These are not new consoles in my view.
We'll definitely have to wait till they come out before we can be definitive. But it really, at least with Sony, it really sounds like they want this to be this year's model of the same thing. Kind of like the difference between an iPad 1 and 2.
Yes.
And that is absolutely the dynamic they're going for. They're not going to call it the Neo on the box is my guess. It's just going to say PS4 and there'll be a date on it. And that, how will you know? Well, this one comes with a terabyte to 2 terabyte hard drive instead of 500 gigs. It's going to be determined by its hardware, not an actual separate title.
I don't know, that kind of scares me that consoles might start doing this yearly hardware refresh, kind of like smartphones and tablets. I really don't want to see that. I really don't.
Depends on how they handle it. Seriously, I don't think they're going to do this. But if you want to have a market like cell phones and tablets and all that other good, can we swear on the show?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, like all that other shit. You see, they need to have a price model like that. Like, let me throw a hypothetical at you.
All right.
You want to buy a new Xbox One or you want to buy a new PS4. It's $400 asking price. But if you sign up for a 2-year contract stating that you'll be on Xbox Live or PlayStation Plus for the next 2 years, get the system for $100.
I could kind of see that.
I can see them going that route because that will get people to re-up because, oh, $100 purchase for something I'm going to be paying for anyways. I'll pay an extra $100 to get this year's best model.
Yeah.
And, like, if it's contractual, you can do that every 2 damn years or 4 years or whatever they really want. Will they do that, or is this just a push so that they can always have a $400 to $500 model on the shelf? Probably the latter, because I don't think Sony or Microsoft have ever been truly humbled enough to do something nice for a consumer. But, yeah, and also I've heard no rumors about this, just idiots like me speculating, hey, wouldn't it be nice if they did this? But, like, if it's handled well, I mean, even if it's, okay, excluding this jump will be closer to the 5th year of these consoles being out when this happens. If they're going to do this every 6 years, not so horrible.
No,
if they're going to do this every 2 to 3 years, yeah, now I can tell you go fuck yourself. It all depends.
2 to 3 years feels like a giant middle finger to the consumer, if you ask me.
It seriously does, because, okay, maybe this next generation, Sony and Microsoft honor if you say it's 60 frames for one, it's got to be for both. Or else you got to lock them down at 30 for both copies. That lasts 6 months to 2 years. After that's done, forget it. You know what I mean?
Good luck.
You're not going to get developers to keep kowtowing to this. You're just not. You can string them along now because they need to sell them on the consoles to make money. But come the next time around, who knows what the future is going to hold, and it's probably not going to be in the consumer's favor no matter what.
Now, we have another upcoming console, and I don't think what we just said applies so much to it, and that's the Nintendo NX. Which is kind of the redheaded stepchild of consoles right now.
Yeah, first of all, we got to know what it is before we can formulate an opinion on it.
Well, I've seen two... Okay, there's one common theme amongst all the NX rumors and leaks and shit, and that is that it's going to be like a hybrid handheld and home console. It's going to function as a handheld, but you can also take it home and plug it into your TV and play with the controller, which I think is a really cool idea. What worries me is just how much oomph, how much, processing horsepower a hybrid console like that can have. Because you have to find like the right balance of battery life to performance. And you're going to sacrifice performance for battery life no matter what. I mean, what's the point of having it be a handheld if it's going to die in like 4 hours?
I mean, according to Kotaku, and again, this is all speculation, nothing definitive here, they're talking original Xbox level graphics and hardware, which sounds incredible for a portable.
Okay, no, that doesn't sound incredible for one reason. The NVIDIA Shield has already proven that you can do handheld, like, 360 and PS3 level visuals. And not to mention, some smartphone games look as good as 360 games. Modern Combat 5 comes to mind.
Right, but if Nintendo gets the balls to try to charge $400 to $500 for this hybrid bastardized version of a Game Boy, they're going to go out of business real damn quick. Like, that's the thing. It's like this... Even though it's going to be their flagship model, if they try to go high-end, they're going to tank.
I'm betting that this thing is probably going to cost about $350, like, around the same price the Wii U did. And from what, like, I've been gathering, I read a lot of articles on this, various websites, various forums and Reddits as well for leaks. The initial... like, tech specs of it were going to involve yet another 8-core AMD CPU and whatnot. And that kind of seems like it's not going to be the case now. Now they're talking about it being an NVIDIA custom-made ARM processor. You know, like the processors that are in your phone and tablet.
Right.
And there is only one NVIDIA SoC, system on chip, that is powerful enough to be up to that level of performance, and that is the Tegra X1, which is the CPU that's in the Google Pixel C, which I think is the most powerful tablet around right now. And it's also in the NVIDIA Shield, the streaming box. It's a very powerful chip, but it still falls short of the base Xbox One and PS4. So that has me a little bit concerned for Nintendo. Not to mention, the Tegra X1 is still power hungry. It's not very efficient. So this thing would have about a 5-hour battery life if we're being generous as a handheld.
That actually sounds exactly like what they're going to launch, though. You figure 5 hours out in the world, but it's made to be both, you know, household and out in the wild sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a plug into the charger, use the actual thing as a remote to play the game. Maybe, possibly, we don't know. But, like, all of that sounds exactly like what Nintendo is going to do. Because I don't see, like, the comparison to this new NX to the even the current gen PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones, I'm almost positive Nintendo is not actually trying to direct compete with the actual hardware or graphic fidelity of either of those systems.
No.
I mean, look at the games that come out for Nintendo. They wouldn't need that amount of hardware. I mean, we're talking what's going to be their flagship: Zelda, Pokemon, Mario Maker, and I doubt anyone's really going to, like, hurry up and set the charge for new third-party games. That's probably going to come with time. But it's, as a handheld, do you really want complicated games that you would play on any of your consoles or PCs on the go?
Okay,
like,
me personally, I'm a power user, as you might say. I'm a hardcore gamer. Me, yes, I do want those kinds of games on handheld. I'm very critical of mobile gaming because of the fact that times, but I wish that there were more, you know, real games, as I would call them, on mobile.
Now, how much of the market do you think people like you actually represent?
Probably not a whole lot, honestly.
And what is it that Nintendo loves to do? Sell to the lowest common denominator.
Yep.
So, I am guaranteeing you that all the things you were saying about the NX, probably true. And I honestly think that Nintendo itself is better off because it can't compete with Sony or Microsoft right now. It just can't. It's had a massive kick to the balls with the Wii U, but even before that, like, when just talking about the Wii, like, they're a toy company. Like, and that's not me criticizing. I love Nintendo titles, but they're a toy company. They're family friendly. They're made for children and children of all ages. You're not going to see high end jibs and blood and guts and particles and shit on any Nintendo system. It's just they're not even going to try to strive for that.
Okay, no, you're wrong about that. You'll see it on the system. You won't see it in Nintendo-made products, though. Nintendo's first-party titles. I will remind you that Resident Evil Revelations started on the 3DS. And not to mention, Nintendo stepped in and they fronted the money to complete development of a game called, Devil's Third. By the way, that game was shit. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Nintendo was at least trying to branch out with, you know, the kinds of games that they will publish and to, like, improve their image instead of just being, you know, the kiddie company.
Well, that was then, too, and now that they've alienated just about any third-party developer out there, you think there's going to be a rush to actually make anything like that for the NX?
I think the usual suspects will come forward, and they will probably put out something for the NX at first to test the waters. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about Ubisoft, for one, because Ubisoft are whores.
No, they sure are.
And Capcom, because Capcom seems to always be willing to work with Nintendo no matter what, for whatever reason.
I can't believe you're actually banking on Capcom coming out with a new IP anytime in the relatively near future.
Oh, no, I'm not saying a new IP. I'm just saying they will put something on the NX, not a new IP. But they will definitely put something on the NX. Like, Capcom is pretty reliable when it comes to putting whatever they can on whatever console.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two third parties that I'm pretty sure will be putting something on the NX. EA, maybe. EA actually skipped out on the Wii U, the same way they skipped out on the Dreamcast. I guess EA can smell a stinker from a mile away.
Or they just don't have it or want to deal with that crazy-ass other way of making a gameplay, so why bother?
Yeah. Oh, Activision will probably be another one who will test the waters on the NX. And I think we have to keep in mind, I know I've seen news of third parties saying that they were pretty pleased with how the NX is so far. I think the president of Take-Two Interactive said that recently. But the same thing was said before the Wii U came out, and look what happened.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, if they're contractually in bed with each other, then they're going to be sucking each other off before they end the contracts. Yeah. Like it's in everyone's best interest to do that. You can never believe what they say. Like, and not to be cynical, that's just the truth of it. Is never believe a corporate entity that wants you to buy a product before it comes out. When they say everything's great, it's gonna be fine. I don't know. I got a lot of hope in the NX because I kind of hope that they double down on making first-party Nintendo games good and available. And if what I'm thinking is true, if they're actually doing what we're all thinking they're doing, and merging their mobile and home divisions in Nintendo proper together, then they can effectively double the output of games they've been putting out per year.
I think that feels kind of like a Hail Mary from Nintendo. They kind of took a look at their home console business and see, well, it's faltering. It's like staggering. It's about to go down for the 10 count. Look at mobile with the 3DS. The 3DS this month outsold the PS4 and the Xbox One.
It's a hell of a system, man. It's a really good handheld.
And well, the thing they don't make just like simple handheld games for it though. They make fully fledged like RPGs and shit for it too. And the 3DS is a runaway success. It's great, and if they actually do merge their handheld and home console divisions, I'm all for it. Like, I mean, Nintendo.
And now, with Nintendo's new secondary system, the cell phone, I am positive that 3DS outselling everything is because you got 20 to 30 to 40-somethings. Hey, I haven't played a Pokemon game since I was 13. Well, how cheap is this thing? Well, shit. May as well pick me up one. I've got the bug. I mean, it's no coincidence that 3DSs are doing that well in the 2 months that it's been since that damn app has, like, made more money than there is on the Earth. Like,
yeah, I have no doubt that Pokemon Go has something to do with the spike in 3DS sales.
I mean, Pokemon, period, probably is contributing to 74%, if not more, of all 3DS sales, and then whatever the hell that turn-based RPG that everyone loves is probably the rest of it.
Fire Emblem, right?
That's the one, thank you.
Yeah. Now, okay, going back to like the tech specs of the NX, we mentioned that it might be using the Tegra X1, which is what powers the NVIDIA Shield. And it's a respectable chip for mobile. It doesn't quite stack up to the current gen consoles. Here's the thing, though. The Tegra X1 is old. It's about a year and a half old. Actually, no, never mind. It's getting close to 2 years old at this point. And NVIDIA hasn't just been sitting on their ass this whole time. They are developing the successor to the Tegra X1. So, for sake of argument, let's just call it the Tegra X2. Now, the jump from the predecessor to the Tegra X1 to the Tegra X1 was like a... Let me remember. What was that? Like a 60 to 70% performance increase? If that jump from the Tegra X1 to the X2 is that big, then you've got a handheld that is on par, possibly even faster than the current PS4 and Xbox One that can also function as a home console. And if you ask me then, Nintendo can finally, like, shake off the stigma of having weak, anemic hardware that nobody wants to buy. Because even though a lot of console gamers, they don't quite understand the what's under the hood of their machines as well as PC gamers do, but they still like to wave their dick around and say that they have the most powerful console. And I think shaking that stigma will help Nintendo.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Idiots like to say things like that, like, the GameCube was actually more powerful. Yeah, we know, but who cares? I think at this point, it's more to like, I'm tired of looking at Mario being pixelated.
Yeah.
Like, it's well, again, 3DS. Wow, 3D is a cool gimmick that lasts for 5 minutes. But you know what? I really wish that on the XL, I couldn't actually see the little square bits that everybody's composed of. Um, yeah, look, I mean, it's. I'm interested. You know what I mean? I'm severely interested. It's all that hardware and all that conveniently small package that's going to do the best of both worlds. My main fear is, what is this monstrosity going to cost?
Like I said, I'm still like guesstimating like $350 or so.
That'd be the absolute max that I think they could get away with.
Yeah, they're going to have to sell it at a loss, which console makers have the luxury of doing that. They're not like. Let's go off on a little tangent here with whenever they tried to make PCs more like accessible with the Steam machines and like the little pre-built console-looking PCs.
Mm-hmm.
The companies who are making those refuse to sell them at a loss. Like, actually, they couldn't sell them at a loss like console makers can, because they don't make money off of licensing fees. And they like a machine that is like even a third as powerful as what I have right now, still a respectable little budget rig, would end up costing like $500+.
Yeah, and also like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, they have branches of their companies that are devoted to manufacturing hardware. Now, most of that is outsourced, but they're still contractually obligated to Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can pay those employees, make your stuff, sell it at a loss, and you don't go out of business because you control that from the ground up. PC makers, they're selling hardware, you know, and that's always going. That's going to be the final and probably the constant hurdle for PCs as a substitute for consoles, is that if you don't have the dough, then it's a huge barrier to entry.
Yeah, like even a budget system that can perform as well as the current consoles that are out would still cost you about $300. And I can buy a used Xbox One on eBay for $180. So
that's my point, and that's a very that's after you find the pieces yourself and put it together yourself, and have some friends that sold you some used parts. Yep. You know what I mean?
Actually, no, because there are some used parts that are just as powerful as what's in the consoles that are only like $60 brand new.
Okay, that is cool, but I mean, I'm not even saying top end. I'm saying I want a system that is worth buying over a console because I'm going to see it that much more.
Then you're looking at like $500+.
Exactly, and like one thing I've always talked about on my my other shows and my other websites is that like that price to entry, because when you look at the Xbox One, you look at the PlayStation 4, what you have is an absolutely really good looking system for $350. You know, it's convenient, it's cheap. You never have to toy with it. You don't, like, if the hardware inside burns, I don't have to pull it out. It's under warranty because the system is supposed to work as a whole, you know?
Yeah.